The numbers always kind of update over the course of the night. All the tracking software that I use, they have like their kind of initial data, but then they kind of sift through everything and double check it. So the half court offense numbers that I gave last night, I had at 106 to 100. The finals, according to Cleaning the Glass, after they went through everything, 107.1 offensive rating points per 100 half court plays for Minnesota compared to 100 for Denver. So a pretty sizable gap in half court execution for Minnesota. Both teams shot really well. The Timberwolves got 1.19 points per jump shot. The Nuggets got 1.18 points per jump shot. Both teams were top 10 in jump shooting efficiency in the regular season. So I don't think shooting variance played much of a role in this particular game. Minnesota did generate more spot-up opportunities, though, which is a strong indicator of how often you get the defense into rotation. They generated 29 spot-up opportunities compared to just 13 for the Nuggets. Now, one of the things with Minnesota, they're going to try to dare you to beat them one-on-one and two-on-two as much as possible, because they know the strength of their defense is individual defense, not team-based, rotation concepts, right? So like they're a team that's going to try to keep you playing on an island as much as possible. So I have five major notes from the film before we get into the film. So first, you remember how I talked about last night about Anthony Edwards starting on Jamal Murray until the first timeout in that first possession? When it was going through live, again, I always just pick up more of the intricacies after I get a chance to rewatch a game, which, by the way, is a strong sign of how coaching an NBA basketball team is a really tough job, because you have to figure all that stuff out on the fly. You get to make adjustments game to game, but within each game, if you can make adjustments on the fly, that is a way to gain advantages. And it just is a strong indicator, like, these guys are the best in the world at what they do for a very specific reason, right? So the reason why Ant was switched off of Jamal at the first time out. So he did an awesome job on that first possession, but then he lost him a bunch of times. Lost him in the corner for three. There was a double stagger at the top of the key where he went under both picks and gave Jamal a wide open three. There was another one where he lost him on kind of like a back cut that was dropped off for Gordon it was dropped off for Aaron Gordon for a dunk. And so I think on that first time out, I think Minnesota actually just said, Ant's not doing a very good job right now, and we don't want Jamal to get into a rhythm. So they wanted to switch Jaden onto him. Ant, I think is going to be very good at this in the long run, but like tracking shooters, lock and trail defense, screen navigation, those are things that he can still get a lot better at. But when he's on an island, he's already one of the very best. And you saw that on that first possession when Jamal tried to ice him or isolate him at the end of the shot clock. So again, I thought that was interesting. Like that, Jamal was doing a good job of breaking free from Ant, and the Wolves made an adjustment. Secondly, I thought Ant's playmaking was really impressive on rewatch of the game. He only had three assists. That does not accurately measure his shot creation in this game. Did a lot of work getting the defense into rotation. There were a couple of Mike Conley buckets, I think in the late third quarter, if I remember correctly, where Conley drove a closeout for a layup and hit a corner three at the end of a shot clock. Both of those possessions were started by Ant getting the defense into rotation by making easy reads. He also was a big part of Naz Reid getting going at the end of the game. The corner closeout attack where he hit the and one driving layup, that was because of Ant. The two wing threes that he hit, the bank and then the other one, those were from hard nail help. If I think Ant generated both of those, if I remember correctly. Ant was the one that was getting those advantage situations that he was capitalizing on. So again, I just want to kind of reemphasize, like, Ant went in there into Denver last night and just played a hell of a game. And that was the main reason why Minnesota got a win. The third note from the film, I talked a lot last night about Denver needing to free up Jamal Murray from Jaden McDaniels, and I talked about rescreening and like more complicated screening actions to generate more of a gap. That was just thoroughly confirmed for me on film. Like whenever they did a lot of multiple rescreens on the same possession, again, what that means is like guy comes up and sets a screen, he comes off, he'll flip and turn and set the action the other way, and then flip and set the other way. They'll basically set the same ball screen multiple times in a row until finally you get the perimeter defender out of position so you can get some separation. Sprinting from other spots on the floor, you'll see, again, you're going to see examples of these when we get into the film, but like when Jamal would like start, on the left side of the floor and kind of jog around and then suddenly just take off sprinting from underneath the basket and come off like two screens before he caught with Jokic, he would get Jaden into more of a trail position where he's like 2-3 feet behind him. And that allowed him to just more freely navigate downhill. And then also that floater range, again, like I talked about, are where the majority of his opportunities were. And then staggered screens. Anytime that they did a good job getting like a guard screening action before they'd flow into the Jokic Murray two-man game, they did a better job of freeing him up. Again, Jamal can make the shots. You just have to find a way to free him up. Shrinking the floor on Ant. This was a major issue, I thought. I thought Denver let Ant operate way too comfortably with his back to the basket in that like 15 to 17 foot range. Like he's just way too locked in on these short fadeaway jumpers against smaller guards. He's 11 for 18 in the paint non-restricted area so far in this postseason, and 14 for 29 from mid-range. So like he's what's that, 25 for 47 in total? That's over 50%. So he's like dead eye locked in on all these like little short mid-range jump shots. So I think they just need to shrink the floor. Again, make Ant a playmaker in this series as much as possible. He's the one guy in the series other than Jokic that's going to have basically no issue getting to his spots. And so you got to make things more uncomfortable for him. Now with Denver, it actually makes sense for Minnesota to make Jokic score because they have such amazing off-ball scoring talent. Minnesota does have some off-ball scoring talent, but they have multiple guys in that unit that you can afford to kind of close out on rather than needing to stay glued up to. So I think for Denver, it makes more sense to kind of shrink things on Ant, whereas for Minnesota, it makes sense to kind of leave Jokic on an island. And then lastly, and this is the major note that I had from the game, Jokic just needs to be better. Now, before we go any further, I know that Jokic was the best Denver Nugget last night. I know Jamal Murray really struggled. I get it that Jokic isn't like the reason why they lost the game. But this is what happens when you become the best player in the world. I think Jokic is the best player in the world. There is a standard and a responsibility that comes with that title, right? Like LeBron fans get mad at me all the time for being critical of LeBron because of how great he is. That's why I hold LeBron to a different standard, because he is the second best player of all time. And so there are certain things that come with that. It's like a responsibility of the title, right? And Jokic has that best player in the world title. There is a responsibility that comes with that. And like, again, Anthony Edwards is playing at an insanely high level right now. So Jokic was able to kind of have some mediocre performances in the Lakers series and still be the best player in the series. That I don't think is going to be enough against Minnesota. He's going to have to kind of push the pedal to the metal more and be more dominant. Like when you have the best player in the world title and Anthony Edwards comes into your building and soundly outplays you to steal home court, you are the guy that has to flip that dynamic, turning the headlight towards Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon and all these other guys on the roster. That to me is losing the plot. You're Nikola Jokic. You're the best player in the world. You've got to outplay Anthony Edwards. That's what you have to do. And so again, as I said in the series preview, this is a Jokic series. Even if Jamal's calf was healthy, he's being guarded by the best perimeter defender in all of basketball. And Rudy Gobert is protecting the rim behind him. So just expecting Jamal Murray to be what flips the dynamic of the series isn't a good idea, even if he was healthy. I know Nuggets fans think he's struggling just because of the calf, and there's no doubt that plays a role. But a big part of it is this is the best defense in basketball. That's the best perimeter defender in basketball. This is not an easy job for him. Jokic has a much better matchup against Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, Karl Towns, than Jamal Murray does against Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Anthony Edwards. He's got the matchups, right? And here's the thing. Jokic is definitely capable of playing a much better game than he did last night. He had 7 turnovers. There are 3 things in particular that stood out to me on film that Jokic has to be prepared for in game 2. 1, the Wolves brought a lot of random pressure against him, and he was caught off guard by it. One of his first turnovers, I don't even think this got classified as a turnover for him, but you'll see it on the film. It was just a high post flash. He just kind of flashed right along the foul line, calling for the basketball, and Gobert ran up and put his hands on him. And I told you guys in the film session before the series, be ready for Minnesota to be handsy off the ball and trying to fight Denver Nuggets off of spots. We knew this was going to happen in this series. And Jokic kind of flailed and tried to get a foul call instead of just bumping Gobert off and getting the ball. And Gobert ended up knocking the ball away from him, and it ended up being a turnover. Actually, I think he just stopped Jokic from getting to the ball, and the ball went out of bounds. But it was like Gobert just kind of caught him off guard with some physicality, and it led to a turnover. Naz Reid, like random pressure. Remember, that was a big thing that Naz did to KD in the last round. Naz and Karl Towns, they would just like randomly pressure KD. They were doing the same thing to Jokic. Naz forced Jokic into a travel there in the second half where he caught an inbounds pass, wasn't ready for Naz Reid to like quickly pressure him in the backcourt, and it led to a turnover. So again, he just needs to be more cognizant and aware of the fact that Minnesota is going to try to jank this thing up with a bunch of random stunting and ball pressure and things along those lines. 7 turnovers is just not going to cut it in this series against this defense. 2, Gobert is playing him to pass on the roll. Huge play in this game was that late possession, the ball screen or the 2-man game with Murray and Jokic, where Jokic caught on the roll and Gobert just kind of stunted at him like that. And Jokic threw the lob and Gobert was able to get up and break it up. That wasn't even the first time that happened in that game. There were a bunch of times where Gobert just kind of like preyed on Jokic being passive and looking to pass the basketball when he was operating close to the rim. Jokic's entire mentality has to shift more towards scoring. He has the best advantages in the series. This needs to be a 35-point per game type of series from Nikola Jokic. And then lastly, he didn't really start asserting himself in the post until the fourth quarter. His first 2 post moves on Rudy Gobert and Karl Towns were passive fadeaways, leaning really far away from the basket. He only shot 3 for 7 out of the post in this game, had a turnover. He did draw 3 fouls. So he was only like a little over 50% in effectiveness out of that post. He can do a lot better. And I'm talking about him as a shooter. He can do a lot better out of the post. And so, again, these are all things that I expect Jokic to flip the script on. I expect him to be a much more dominant post player over the course of the series. I expect him to solve that Gobert kind of stunting on the back line. And I expect him to be more comfortable under the physicality and the ball pressure of Minnesota over the course of the series. At the end of the day, Jokic is the best player in the world. This is part. I talked about this after game. I think it was in game 5, if I remember correctly. Like last year was relatively easy for Denver. And when you look back through NBA history and you look at the dynasties, there are years where it's easy and there are years when it's not. And this is definitely one of those years you're facing tougher teams. You faced a better Laker team than the Laker team you faced last year. This is a much better Timberwolves team than the Timberwolves team that you faced last year. This is going to be a challenge. And if you win this series, whichever team between Dallas and Oklahoma City gets out is going to be a much better team than than that Phoenix Suns roster you played last year. And guess what? You're probably not facing the Miami Heat. Well, you definitely aren't facing the Miami Heat in the finals. You're probably going to face a Boston team or a Knicks team, right? So like you're going to have a really, really difficult road here. This is going to be a challenge. Jokic is going to have to really assert himself as the best player in the world over the course of the next month and a half.